Playing by ear has been a mystery for so many people for so many years. Growing up, I was told that you just need to have a good ear, or you just need to be born with the skill, or you got to be a gifted prodigy musician to be able to play by ear. And all of those are myths. For someone who didn't start learning piano until I was in my late teens, and then I was able to learn to play by ear, I have come to realize that, one, you don't need to be gifted, you don't even need to have a good ear. All of that stuff can be learned. And so today I want to share with you guys 10 sort of steps, 10 tips that you need to be working on actively every day if you desire to play by ear. It's not a skill that's just going to fall out of the sky and then next thing you know, you're able to sit at the piano and play your favorite songs. And also know, learning how to play music via sheet and score doesn't help you to be able to play by ear. So stick around, we're gonna go through each of those steps one by one, and I'm gonna give you some tips as to how to approach each of these and why these tips are important to playing by ear. Welcome back. My name is Warren McPherson. If you're new to the channel, please give us a like and a subscribe so I can continue to provide videos like these on a weekly basis for you. Now let's jump right into it. How does one really learn how to play by ear in a sort of a logical format? What are the things that we actually need to learn how to do? So the first thing I have on my list here is understanding of scales, particularly the major scales and the minor scales. There are a lot of scales out there. But at the fundamental level, the two most important scales, especially for Western music, are major scales and minor scales. Why is that? Because every song you hear on the radio, all your favorite song lives in one of these keys, right? Think about the scales as a house. And within the house, you got your couch, you got your living room, you got your kitchen, you got your bedroom, your dining room, all of those individual elements within the house is what we'd call the chords, the melodies, the progression, the licks, the runs, all of those cool things live within the house. And the house is the scale. Before you can start to understand music via playing by ear, you need to understand the scale, how it works, and its importance, because everything needs to live within a scale. And so my recommendation is, before you can begin to learn to play by ear, you need to know all 12 major scales and minor scales. You need to be able to look at the keyboard and just see them. So if I say, hey, play me C sharp major scale, you need to be able to play me that scale. Now, correct fingering and all of that is for a separate discussion. Now we're just talking about the knowledge. You need to know the notes that live within the scale. So that's the first thing. If you don't know that yet, you need to start working on that actively. And if you're looking for resources, I have a free PDF about how you can learn all 12 major scales with the correct fingering, and I'm going to link to that down below. You can download that. Step number 2 to learning piano by ear is you have to learn the theory of how chords are built and spelled, right? Playing by ear predominantly requires us to be able to play chords. 95% of what you're going to be doing when you're playing by ear is accompanimental or playing chords behind somebody, or playing chords while playing the melody. We can't play by ear without understanding how chords work. So if I say build me a C major chord, you need to be able to say that's a C major chord. If I say build me a B flat minor chord, you need to be able to do that. And so part of understanding this chord structure is knowing what we call the primary chords and the secondary chords of the major scale. For example, in the key of C, chord 1, chord 4, and chord 5 are primary chords and they are major chords. Chord 2, chord 3, chord 6 are minor chords and they're secondary chords, along with chord 7, which is diminish. And so part of this understanding chord is understanding the relationship each chords hold within the key via the number system. So all of this falls under chord theory. And so we have sort of 5 basic triad chords that every musician should know if you desire to play by ear, and you need to be able to build these chords at an instant on any key on the piano. Major chords, minor chords, diminished chords, augmented chords, and suspension chords. Every chord that you hear, doesn't matter how complex, jazz chords, this, that, all of those chords are built on one of these 5 triads. So if you're sitting here like, I don't know any of those things, I'm not quite sure how to build all these different chords, well, you need to get cracking on that, because that's one of the most important steps. Before we can even sit and start playing our favorite songs, we need to understand what those chords are, how to build them, and then how they function within the major key and the minor key. And again, over at pianolessonwithwarren.com, I have tons of videos that explain each of this in detail. So that's step number 2, learning your chord, spelling, and building. Step number 3 is to learn how to play common progressions from memory in all 12 keys. Especially pop songs. Most pop songs and even some popular CCM gospel songs are built on what I call the popular progressions. And so popular progressions would be like 1, 6, 2, 5, right? So that's the 1, 6, 2, 5 progression. And you're probably like, yeah, I've heard that chord progression before. And there are a lot of them. I call them popular chord progressions. We got to get comfortable with those. And so in all 12 keys, right? Because playing by ear is not something we just pull out of thin air. There's an element of playing by ear that requires muscle memorization, a foundation that we can then build on. And part of building that foundation is through learning what are the common things. It's just like if you're learning a language, right? If you're learning Spanish or French or German or Japanese or whatever, the first thing you're going to learn are the common words within this language. How to be able to say, excuse me, good morning, good evening, how can I would like this. You know, you learn the common phrases that you need to be able to start communicating. So it's the same thing with playing by ear. You need to learn what are the common chord progressions that you'll come across very frequently in most songs, and we need to knock those out. I also have a course over at pianolessonwithwarren.com that goes through the 6 basic chord progressions in all 12 keys, and I walk you through that with correct fingerings and all of that. So that's tip number 3. You gotta learn your progressions, and you gotta learn them in all 12 keys from early, because we don't wanna get locked into just being able to play in one key, right? That doesn't help anyone. Tip number 4 is to learn how to play chords using inversion. That's right. One of the common mistakes of beginners is they start right away just learning chords in root position. Right? Because you learn a chord and you're just kind of locked into that. Nothing is wrong with that, right? But if you find yourself in that position, you want to turn left immediately. Start learning what it means to play chords and inversions, because that's where the magic lies. When you're watching your favorite keyboard player or you're listening to your favorite song, that's why they sound the way they sound. We're not using root position, we're using inversions. Now, what's the purpose of inversion versus root positions? Inversions allow you to get to different chords without making too many movements. For example, if I want to play a C to A minor, in root position, it would look like this, C to A minor. You see how disconnected that sound because I had to jump that far, right? But what if I just simply put up my pinky? Now I'm playing A minor, but it's an inversion. It's the same notes of A minor, right? A, E, and C. A, E, and C. Every chord can be played in 3 different positions. Root position, second inversion, first inversion. And so we have to get comfortable being able to see every chord in 3 different positions. So then when you're playing, you don't have to go very far to get to the next chord. And that's what gives us the sound that you hear in recordings. Inversion is what allows me to do all of that. And this is not something that just, now you learn inversions and it's done. It requires practicing, right? To the point where it becomes almost automatic. You don't have to think much about it. But it has to be something that is deliberately placed forward in your attempt to learn to play by ear. So right out the gate, start to learn progressions, start to learn inversions. And this might be a little bit intimidating. You're saying, Warren, so many things to learn. The thing is, we don't learn all of these things at once. We learn them over time, but you need to learn them in a structured way. So it kind of makes sense. Your brain needs to digest things in structure, a manner that makes sense, that build on top of each other to avoid overwhelm. And that's what Piano Listen For can do for you, all right? Let's look at now, where are we now? Tip number 5, you need to learn how to pitch match. Now, what is that? If I were to hide my keyboard and then I play this note on the piano, and I say, can you go on that keyboard, your keyboard, and find me this note? Right? What if you can't see the note? You're just purely hearing it. You need to be able to go on the keyboard and pick out and find this note. That's what we call pitch match. Another way to practice pitch match is to be able to sing back notes that you hear. La, 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 la. There's a little down in my chest register. So you know what I'm saying? Pitch match. Playing by ear, you need to be able to pitch match, because when you hear something in your recording, you need to know what note that is. Not saying you got to sit there and say, that's a C sharp, because that requires perfect pitch, whole other set of video for that. But you need to be able to then hear that note, go and sit in front of your keyboard and find that note. Pitch matching is a super important part of playing by ear. I can't stress the importance of that. And for that, I have an ear training app called Active Ear. It's free for download. And in that app, we have a level called pitch recognition, where you can practice and train yourself to be able to pitch match. So if you haven't heard about Active Ear yet, it's available for all Androids and iPhones and so on, tablets, iPads. You can download that and start to work on your ear training, right? In a logical way. Let's take a look now at number 6. Learn how to identify diatonic intervals. Now, this is a combination of being able to pitch match. Intervals are the building blocks of music. If we take again the house analogy, when we look at a house, what we're looking at is hundreds of different blocks, depending on where you live, hundreds of them that compile together to build a house. Intervals are like the same thing. When we hear a song, a beautiful melody, beautiful chord progressions, it's hundreds of intervals being woven and stacked and moving together to create that beautiful piece. So we need to understand what intervals are, because when we understand intervals, we can then begin to understand what we're hearing. So when I hear something like this, I can tell that's a perfect fourth. That was not something I just grew up learning. I had to learn what intervals are, the different type of intervals, and then eventually learn to be able to identify them by ear. And again, my Active Ear app has a level in it that deals with interval recognition and all of that stuff for you to practice. But part of being able to play by ear is being able to understand the intervals that you're hearing. All right? Number 7 is to learn how to identify basic progression. So you see, now we're building. First, you need to be able to pitch match, then interval recognition. Now you need to understand progression. And I talk about these things in videos and courses on my website in details. So when I'm listening to a song and I hear, without touching my keyboard, I can tell that's a 1-6-2-5. It's not a magic trick. Like I said, there are ways to learn this, and I've taught hundreds of students how to do this. There is a method to be able to sit and listen to a chord progression and tell what it is. Or if you're not able to tell what it is, to be able to sit and figure it out in no time what chords you're hearing. So that's what we call understanding progression by ear, right? That's part of playing by ear. Let's take a look now at number 9, is to learn the melody of every song that you play on the piano. I've seen a lot of students trying to learn a song and they're saying, man, it's so hard to learn the chords to this song. And I said, can you sing the melody of the song? Just hum it. Like if I say Amazing Grace. I mean, most people know Amazing Grace. But for example, da 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 da. I could just hum that melody without even giving it much thought. But for all the songs that you've attempted to learn, can you accurately just hum the melody for those songs? The melody of a song is your guide. Without knowing the melody intuitively, without having it memorized, you're going to struggle to be able to play the song, to play the chords to the song, because that means you do not know where the song is going. You don't have a structure. Imagine trying to drive cross country without a GPS. Would you even get to your destination? Highly doubt it. A GPS is your guide to tell you when to turn left, when to turn right, right? Knowing the melody of a song tells you what chord's coming next, when the chord is changing, or when you need to repeat certain chords, when certain sections of the song is repeated. You cannot accurately play a song if you don't already have that melody internalized, right? So you have to learn the melody very well. So when I'm learning a new song that I've never heard before, I spend just a few days just listening to the song. You don't necessarily have to learn the lyrics. The lyrics is not that important, but you need to know the melody. So that's the first step for me. I have that melody internalized before I even start thinking about chords. Tip number 9 is to learn and understand song structure. This goes back to kind of knowing the melody. In Western music, most songs is divided into, we have an introduction, then we have a verse, then we have a chorus, then you may have a repeated verse, a second verse, then you may have a bridge, then it goes back to a chorus. That's sort of a standard structure of most songs, whether gospel or pop songs, R&B, most songs sort of follow that structure. And that's something you need to understand. When you're listening to a song, you need to be able to say, we're in the verse, now we're in the chorus, now we're in the bridge, now we're back to a chorus. Oh, that's a repeated verse. That's an interlude right there. Over at pianolesswithwarren.com, I have what is known as Transcription Club, where I teach people how to recognize songs by ear. And one of the big things we do over there is analyzing song structure, because not every song is going to follow the same structure, but they usually have all of these, most of these different elements. Not every song has a bridge, not every song has an interlude. Most songs have a verse and a chorus. You got to be able to tell that. Now, why is it important to know the song structure? Because a lot of people, especially beginners, they look at just individual chords. When you start to focus on song structure, it helps you to zoom out to see, okay, so the verse, this is what's going on here. Oh, it's just the 1, 6, 2, 5, and then they throw in a 3 and the 2, 5, 1. Once you can start to compress the song down to sort of like just the core chords, what's going on, you're able to memorize it quicker, right? Kind of same like how computers work. When you can compress files on a computer, you can store more files on such computer. If you allow the files to be big, then you can only store so many files. So part of memorization is being able to compress the important details down to their minute parts. And so understanding song structure allows us to do that comfortably. And lastly, tip number 10, if you want to be able to play by ear, thing that you need to be able to do is to rely more on memorization and tactile learning. For people who've been trained classically or people who learn how to play the piano through notes, it's very hard for them to let go of the idea that they need to learn everything through the sheet. But I'm telling you right now, if you want to learn to play by ear, you have to draw a line in the sand where you said, I will no longer use the sheet. You have to. Playing by ear requires you to not only rely more on memorization, but through muscle learning, where you learn how to move between different chords through tactile learning, and that requires repetition. You can't rely on your sight. Now, I'm not saying if you read score or if you know how to read music, you can't learn by ear, because I do both and do both very well. In fact, I learned how to play by ear first, then I learned how to read notes. Both require two different approaches. And so if you want to learn by ear, you can't continue to rely on the score. That's a crutch. You have to say, I'm going to put away the score and I'm going to learn to play by ear using these tips that Warren just laid out. Will the process be a lot slower? Yes. It's going to feel like you're going back to training wheels on a bike, but you have to. I learned by ear first. When I started learning how to play by score, it was as if I was learning the piano all over again. Nothing made sense because I'd gotten so used to just relying on my ear and my tactile ability. But eventually I learned how to do both comfortably well. I just had to be willing to know that the skill that allows me to play by ear isn't necessarily going to help me to play by notes. And as I was learning to play by notes better, I realized I couldn't just transfer those skills over to getting better at playing by ear. It's two separate paths. So these are the top skills to learning piano by ear. You gotta learn your scales, you gotta learn theory of building chords, you gotta learn common chord progressions from memory in all 12 keys. You need to learn to play chords using inversions, learn how to pitch match, learn how to identify diatonic intervals through ear, and learn how to identify basic progressions by ear. Learn the melody of every song, and learn to understand song structure. And lastly, rely more on memorization and tactile learning opposed to learning music from the sheets. These are 10 important steps that you have to make a part of your daily routine if you want to be able to play by ear comfortably. Now, I've mentioned if you want to get better at ear training and learning how to identify things by ear, download my free ear training app, Active Ear. And in the description below, I'm going to put a bunch of links of free PDFs you can download that helps you with like learning your major scales and learning some basic chord progressions, right? If you want to learn more about playing by ear in a structured way and learning songs, I highly recommend you check out pianolessonwithwarren.com. We have a great program over there for musicians wanting to play the piano by ear, right? And check out this video if you want to learn more about some of the steps that we talk about in this video. All right? So until then, keep listening, keep singing, keep practicing, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye for now.